This is Thomas Mills with Restless Natives NC. We've been on hiatus since March, but we're back. And my guests, Anderson Clayton and Travis Fain, are going to take you through to the general election and give you all the skinny and everything you need to know as we head into the general election. All right, I guess we got to start today with the Senate election and Roy Cooper. I saw a poll come out today that has him up again by 9 points. I think it was a Fox News poll. Last few weeks ago, one came out that had him up by 4, and I think every Democrat was changing their underwear after that. But I still think Roy Cooper's in a good place. Let me start with Travis. Travis, you give us the straight scoop before we get Anderson in here.
I
what's
think
going on in that Senate race?
I'm in the same place I was, 6 months ago. This is Cooper's race to lose, and he'll probably win it by a smaller margin than the polling shows. But I think that margin, for me at least, it is going up. Whatley is still an unknown. I saw polling recently, still kind of an unknown with his own people. That will, of course, start to change. But I just don't get the sense we're going to see a lot of money spent here, but I don't get the sense with all the other things that Republicans have to worry about on the map around the country that he's going to show the kind of extreme viability it takes to just flood the zone in a way that makes a difference, if a difference can be made. So much of our elections these days are kind of about mood and vibe and who the president is as opposed to who the candidate is. And in this case, the candidate in Roy Cooper is an excellent candidate. So I just think this is a very difficult hill for Republicans to climb.
Yeah, especially when said president has made prices go up instead of down, like he made on a campaign promise on the trail, and is really disapproved or has a high disapproval rating among most Americans right now because of that. And I'm just like, we have a president that's lied to the American people. And regardless of if you voted for him or you didn't, like, you at least know that, I think, in this election cycle too. And what we are going to see from that are that a lot of people are going to sit at home because they're not going to feel motivated to come out and support a president's candidate that he was handpicked, which is Michael Whatley, in this election cycle, because they don't want someone to go up there and keep doing what's going on right now. And I think that is the sentiment, at least from every door that I have knocked this year, what I see. And we are confident, not cocky over here at the NC Dems with making sure that we're getting Governor Cooper over the line. So again, if you'd like to get out and knock doors, it's ncdp.org/knock. And we are out there every weekend. We knocked in 100 counties this last weekend. We had over 24,000 doors that got knocked in the state, and we are making sure that we're touching every single corner of North Carolina, because it is an important year for people to get out everywhere, because we've got Roy Cooper at the top of the ticket. We got Justice Anita Earls, though, also on our ballot, everybody. Our Supreme Court warrior that we need to keep on the bench, because right now we have got Republicans on our judiciary that just want to keep backing up Republicans in our state legislature. And I don't know about y'all, but Republicans that are 1,000 days late on a state budget in the state legislature are not necessarily doing their jobs correctly, in my opinion.
Anderson, not to put you too on the spot here, but when y'all knock these doors, I'm interested in what you hear from the people who open those doors. Like, are there any kind of on the ground, anything surprising? I wouldn't be surprised if their gas prices are too high, but what are you hearing that can be summarized that might be interesting, if anything?
So every time that I knock a door, I start out by asking somebody what's an issue that they care about that would get them out to vote in this election cycle. And do you know that the number one answer that I get from people is, I don't know. I've not thought about it. I don't have to think about it. And I'm like, well, you know what I've heard from your neighbors? That, childcare is really high. You've got a neighbor down the street that's got a kid, and the ability for them to be able to go to work every day and do that's really hard. I had a young person that answered the door, and I estimated that he was probably 27, right? And I was talking to him, and I said, it's really hard right now when a lot of us can't make ends meet enough to be out of our parents' house. And he just looked at me and he was like, yeah, I still live at home. And I was like, I could figure that. And it's a little bit, I think, of like the training that goes into how a person talks to somebody on a door, and also like how you can guide somebody through a conversation to get them talking. Because like once that guy looked at me and he was like, yeah, I live at home. Like my job, like it can't pay for me to have rent every month. That's not like me living with my mom. And I was like, yeah, a lot of young people are dealing with that right now because, you know, minimum wage in North Carolina is still $7.25. And like you may not be making that, but you're making $9 when you should be making $15 an hour. And that's something that we're seeing all across the state right now because young people are working service level jobs. And it is truly going at somebody with like information and making them think about issues that they have, but that they don't necessarily see as political. And I think like that leads them down the rabbit hole of a conversation too. But I really do think that a lot of people have not thought about like, we think people are thinking about politics because we're in politics.
Right.
And I'm like, people are still not thinking about politics. Like they don't want to. They just know prices are high. My life sucks. And like it feels like doom and gloom on the internet every day for what we're seeing about this country, the world that we're living in, and right now what we're fighting for. And like that one interaction that you're going to have with them may be the only time that they really come out of that and say, oh my God, okay. And then I'm going to be back around knocking that door again and having somebody else do it again. Because I'm like, look, I want you to know I'm not leaving here until you come out and vote this cycle. And a lot of the doors that we're knocking are people that don't come out and vote in midterm elections. And I think that's really important too.
How many times you got to knock a door before you feel like they'll do that they'll at least vote? 3 times?
Yeah, which is why we've got some really ambitious goals this cycle to make sure that we're doing what we need to, because I think people need a lot of touches, and it's like the touch, and it's layered approaches, right? And I'm not saying anything that somebody else wouldn't say, but I'm like, you don't just reach a person on a door, right? You reach them through what you put out on social media, you reach them through what you do put on TV ads, like. But I value so much like actually having a conversation with somebody who's also in your own backyard. And I think we're trying to do that all over the state and making sure that it's your neighbors that are knocking your door versus somebody who's just randomly there.
That's good. Well, you know, I want to get back to that Senate race a little bit because I've been watching Whatley, and I believe that Whatley is really the problem for the Republicans. I mean, Cooper's a great candidate. There's no question. That his make stuff cost less. It's kind of brilliant because that really is what people are concerned about right now. And to your point, whether it's childcare, whether it's rent, whether it's buying a car, you know, people need it to be more affordable. And so Cooper's kind of cut through all the slogan stuff and just said make stuff cost less. That's good. Whatley, on the other hand, really has had a hard time getting any sort of traction. And it's like a few weeks ago or a month ago, I was watching him getting attacked by Western Republicans. And I don't even know exactly what it was about, but they were like,
I mean, Hurricane Helene relief could be a good guess up in there.
Yeah, it was probably some of that, but it was, you know, feeling like this guy's not been out here for us. This guy's not doing anything for us. You know, he has failed to consolidate his base, and it's really running out of time to do it. You know, you need the first politics 101 is consolidate your base, and he is yet to do that. And that puts him in a hell of a difficult position because before he can start persuading other people to get on board, he's got to persuade his own team to get on board. And I don't think he's done that yet. And I think that's probably what you're seeing in the polls. I did not go look at the internals of the most recent, the Fox News poll, but I got a feeling he's probably still somewhere in the low to mid 80s with his Republicans. And until he gets those folks up into the 90s, he's struggling.
Yeah, and I mean, to that point, there's a lot of feeling that this is more of a turnout election than a persuasion election. And I heard someone say that at an event I was at the other day, and I'd quote them, except I'm not a reporter anymore. It didn't occur to me to ask, is it okay if I share this with people and attach your name to it? So apologies for stealing, but that's what I'm doing. And I think there's a lot of wisdom to that because people, I don't know, one day I hope to understand why people have to be excited to vote, because I don't. It doesn't make any sense to me. But that clearly is part of the formula that you have to get people excited. And I mean, remember, Whatley was handpicked by the president. The president said, "Hey, North Carolina, this is going to be your candidate," and that's what happened. And when you do it that way, there's a benefit to it if the president is popular. But when you don't have to build something, you just kind of do it. It is tougher, right, to bring the base together, I would think. So that was the risk that they took.
Well,
I don't think that that it has to be exciting for people to want to vote. I think it has to be habitual, and you have to have done it several times over again for it to be muscle memory that you remember, oh yeah, I've got to go vote this year. And like something that doesn't help with that is when the state Republicans try to pass a bill, right, that limits Board of Elections folks from being able to advertise, hey, come vote here. And it doesn't help when you've got people in our state legislature that are actively trying to keep people from voting by removing polling locations from very active college campuses and trying to suppress votes, in my opinion, because like why we don't have young people as voters is because it's their first time doing something. Like anybody's first time doing it. If you're not, and that's why in politics, like we ask people to make a voting plan, because if you make a plan to do something, you're a lot more likely to do it just based on scientific evidence. And I think that like a lot of young people are moving from place to place. A lot of people who have never voted in their life just don't know that it's something that they should do, and maybe didn't have the phenomenal upbringing, Travis Fain, maybe that you did, like I did in some ways, where people like instilled in you, this is a privilege to be able to vote. Like not everybody has always been able to do that and have that right. And like, especially if you grow up in a rural part of the state, I think it's something that like is ingrained in you because it's a very heavily like part of the military community in some aspects. And like North Carolina has a very high veteran population. And so the right to vote has sort of been, at least for me, like that was how it was instilled in me when I was growing up, is like people fought for your right to be able to do this. They died for your right to be able to do this. And like it is important that you always value it. And that's why I joke with folks, like when I got to college, I was 17 going into school, and I turned 18 in January of 2016. And I was so excited to register to vote, I didn't know what to do. And like the feeling that was not everybody sort of, I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be the coolest thing. And I was like, no, nobody on my hall cared about going to register to vote. Nobody like that I went to school with was excited about it. And so it was me being like, are you registered? Did you get there? And we need the most active people. And that's where like the one thing, if you do anything, if you're listening to this right now, ask everybody around you if they're registered to vote, and like be the excitement for everybody else to get out there and do it. Because when you see somebody excited about something, you are also excited about it. And we can create that excitement too, not just from like a candidate, but also from each other and community and all the things. But I'm just like, I think it's habitual. I really do. And I think if we actually put it into people, if election day was a federal holiday and people got the day off to go out there and vote, and we made it something where like it was significant in people's lives, like 4th of July is a significant day. We take it off. Everybody celebrates. We go out and we do the things. And I'm like, that is what I want to see for an election day too.
There's also a good argument to be made that giving the people the day off, not just on election day, but on primaries, could help combat extremism. You know, you would have fewer candidates from the far left or the far right if more people saw primary day as a day to get involved, whether you're a part of a party or not. Because I mean, but probably folks listening know this, but we're in a somewhat open primary state. So, you know, you can be registered unaffiliated and decide on primary day, well, I want to vote in the Democrat primary, or I want to vote in the Republican primary. Just because you're not registered with a party, you can still vote in those primaries. And so many races are decided in a primary. So,
especially in North Carolina, where Republicans have gerrymandered the state so much so that they have increasingly made it harder for us to have the ability to have a middle ground or election reach too, because to Travis's point, elections are decided in primaries, but also what helps with making our or more moderate folks in politics is actually having elections where you have to compete to the middle too. And that means having elections that are free and fair and not gerrymandered, like our state legislature and our state Supreme Court have allowed for in North Carolina. My God, it always comes back to Republicans and gerrymandering. Don't know how that happens.
If I knew I was setting you up to talk about gerrymandering, if I got to draw districts, you know, Travis Fain's magic wand, I would draw them, I guess, the opposite of gerrymandering. I would draw as many competitive districts as I could. I would force people to kind of like have to work together, to have to compromise. I would bake that into the system. and just
bipartisanship. That's the word I was looking for. You want a bipartisan legislature and everything else? Give us fair maps. We sent 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans to Congress on fair maps out of a 14-person delegation that we had when we had a Democratic state Supreme Court.
Yeah, although to be fair, and this is, I'm not saying this is Democrats' fault, it's not. But those 7 Democrats and those 7 Republicans were generally elected from districts where only a Republican or only a Democrat would win. And that's not what I want. What I want is, if you have 14 districts in the state, and I don't know that math people don't get on me and be like, well, actually, it's impossible to draw that many competitive districts. I don't know how many competitive districts you can draw, but if there are 14, what would be great to me is if 10 of them a Republican or a Democrat could win, or 9 or 8 or whatever is kind of the maximized possibility without having just crazy lines.
I mean, those 7 seats, Wiley Nickel would argue that he won actually a competitive district in 2020. Actually, he won a district
was the
that
only
nobody
one,
thought that man would win, in fact.
Yeah.
Yes, but again, he would argue. And therefore, so would I, Travis.
I think
What were
you
you trying to say, Thomas
could
Mills?
make 5 or 6 districts competitive. I mean that's kind of what it was in my early days when we didn't have the extreme gerrymandering.
See, y'all want competitive. I just want fair. I'll just take a fair map, and then that way people will feel represented because we're a 50-50 state and it'll be so good.
I want competitive. I think.
Yeah, I want competitive. I mean, I'll take a lot of things, including what I get. So at the end of the day, the people have kind of these issues have all been litigated. They've all, if people want better maps, they need to vote for politicians who will provide them.
Right. So
Justice Anita Earls and our Supreme Court Democrats that need to get on the bench in 2028 because Democrats on the state Supreme Court previously gave us fair maps.
Yeah.
Take it away, Thomas.
Well, I just want to say shout out to Anita Earls for her fundraising operation. She did great in this last quarter. So congratulations. And that's one way in a state like this where she's probably going to have to outspend Republicans and they're going to have a bunch of outside money against her. That helps her. The other thing, though, I do want to talk about as we start talking about elections and how they work is, this has been my pet peeve ever since Republicans stole the Board of Elections from the governor and gave it to Dave Bullock, the state auditor. And we had a mess. We had them putting pressure on local boards of elections to do the bidding of Bullock. And when he took over, he had an opportunity. Every Democrat thought, you're stealing this from the governor and giving it to Bullock in order to rig the elections. And Bullock had a chance to say, no, I didn't. And here's how you're going to know. I'm going to put in fair, professional people. And he didn't. Instead, he found 2 of the most partisan people in the Republican Party and put one of them as chair of the State Board of Elections, Francis DeLuca. And I've known Francis for years, and he's a good guy. But Francis and I, the reason I get along with Francis is we see the world the same way. He has no interest in having Democrats win anything. And he's chair of the Board of Elections. And then he put Dallas Woodhouse, another person who I don't have any problem with Dallas being pro-Republican, but here's the deal. If they ever get that thing back, I'm going to apply. I'm going to want to be part of the State Board of Elections and see how you like that.
Thomas said, and you get a voting site, and you get a voting site, and everybody gets a voting site.
Yeah. But Dallas ended up having to resign because all these emails and texts and everything got leaked where he was basically trying to convince people to or force boards to do what they wanted to do to basically limit Democratic access to the ballot in certain places. And the Republicans said that's what they were trying to do. Republican members of county boards of elections said that he was putting pressure to remove early voting sites that were more beneficial to Democrats, particularly young people and around out west or around Western Carolina University. he wrote a op-ed where he made some points about what needs to be done, and some of his points are good. But here's the problem. I don't care what Dallas says. They undermine the credibility of the Board of Elections, number one, by removing it from the governor, where Pat McCrory did fine with it. When he was a Republican governor, no Democrats tried to do anything to steal it from him. Not that they had control of the legislature, but when they took it away, every Democrat looked at it and said, this is for nefarious purposes. And when they appointed a bunch of people that were hyper partisans to oversee our election cycle, every Democrat said, this is not going to be fair. So what they've set themselves up for is on the backside of the elections, they don't have any credibility. Republicans have no credibility with people like me. I believe they want to rig the elections. I believe they want to steal the elections. I believe they will do whatever they can to win. And and the reason I believe that is because Donald Trump tried to steal an election in broad daylight. And then 4 years later, the Republicans in North Carolina tried to steal a Supreme Court seat. And if they had had the same Board of Elections that they have today, I think they might have been successful in stealing that seat. And I think what they're doing is they're setting themselves up to be able to win close elections, or to, in some cases, overturn board's election results through the Board of Elections. And, they've shown me nothing aside from getting rid of Dallas. That to me, that was not something they planned on doing. That was something they did. And that happened to Dallas. They had to do it. They need to regain some credibility because they got none with my side of the aisle. And they've done everything they could to make us suspicious of what they're doing. So the problem is not what's going on right now. The problem is going to be after the election. If we have elections that are disputed and very close, they don't have any credibility in dealing with them.
I think there is kind of a self-inflicted credibility issue here at the state level, at least. I do want to, we've talked before about how confidence in elections, so much of it rests on the local people who work very hard to put on elections. And, let me not move too much further forward without kind of giving a shout out to some of the local Republican members of boards of election who push back against what they at least perceived, and I think very fairly perceived, as mandates coming down from the top of you should do this with voting sites or you should do that with voting sites. So, these little decisions that can impact election returns. There was pushback from some Republican members of boards of elections. I can't give chapter and verse and names right now, but it happened. And kudos to those folks, because standing up for what you see as right versus what you see as good for your political party is the American damn way. And so thank you for doing that. When it comes to Dallas, he was a liaison from the State Board of Elections or from the auditor's office.
That's the whole thing. He was not from the State Board of Elections. He was from the auditor. He didn't work for the state board. He worked for the auditor, which to me really makes it suspicious. It was not a position that was there before. They created
Thomas, you act like, I'm like, y'all, okay, but be so for real for a second. The party that tried to steal an election from Allison Riggs, it took y'all like, no. We all knew. We knew when they took away the state board. Everybody was like, this is clear. When Dallas Woodhouse, who used to work in the NCGOP, became, to Travis's point, the person that was texting boards of election members in Jackson County saying, if you do not make sure that this student voting site gets taken off of Western Carolina University's campus, we're going to remove you from this position. And Travis, no offense to those folks, they still did it. Like, they didn't have the backbone. They didn't, because I was like, I'll be honest with you, standing up would have been, I'm actually going to take this vote and I'm going to take my leave while I'm at it because I don't want to be part of a party that would threaten me and make this decision for me because I've got to go to the grocery store with these people next week. Like, and that's the reality of local boards of elections. And I am really grateful to all of the folks that submitted public comment, the organizations on the ground that made the case and that went to the state board of elections meetings that were there making sure and that Jackson County board meeting was someone in that audience that recorded that information that they would have never gotten out otherwise, right? And like, if this is the one call out to people out there, 2028 for us is only going to get worse with these same people on these same boards. So get your butt to a board of elections meeting if you've got the time at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday or Thursday or 9 a.m. on a Wednesday, because that's when they decide to have these meetings. And I want you to have your little phone out just like this and make sure that they know everything that they are saying is to Travis Fain's former reporter like point on record because it will be. And we are going to make sure that anything that they're doing in that room should be what people should have to hear everywhere. Because I'm like, it is some of the most insane shit that is coming out of Republicans that are supposed to be, to that point, fair and impartial and balanced and making people believe in election cycles. The only other thing I will say to that is that the SAVE Act, every fucking thing coming out of Donald Trump's mouth right now about trying to make elections or people afraid to go into a ballot box is just that, try to make people afraid to go into a ballot box. We cannot count any vote that is not cast. Like, I beg of you to make sure that you tell everybody your vote matters this election cycle. Please make sure that you're checking your voter registration, because Republicans at the state board of elections are also trying to purge voter rolls in North Carolina right now. They are sending out letters to folks saying that you may be at risk of your vote not counting or whatnot as well. And so if you're getting one of those, go to your local board of elections and make sure that your voter registration is checked, because that is the one thing that you can do. That is the power that you have in this election cycle. Because I'm like, it is very believable that the party that did 2024 to us and took us through the last 6-month election and nihilism would also be the party to have people in voting or in board of elections meetings doing this right now. I'm sorry. I'm just like, whoa, wait a second. We can't. Travis, I love you, but I'm like, I can't thank these Republicans because they did it. They took away a student voting site. Like, even though they had like 100 people in a room that day, they took it away at A&T, even though they had 100 people in the room that day. Do you know how much it takes students to get active in voting? We've just talked about it. And I'm like, they've awoken a sleeping giant, in my personal opinion, too. And I think Republicans are actually going to really regret doing what they have, because I'm like, now everybody knows that you're really afraid of them. I don't know.
I hope you're right. I will say at times what they've tried to do has backfired with various communities when they felt like they were getting threatened and intimidated. Instead of not voting, they came out and voted at higher levels. But let's stop there for a minute, and I want to move to the budget a little bit. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I don't really understand it, and it kind of bores me. But we have one. And it's the first time we have one in how long? How many months? Like 26 months or something? How long? I don't know. The last budget that was passed was so long ago, I can't even remember it. So
that's just like 3 years, right, Travis?
Has it been 3 years?
I don't remember. And I mean, it's smaller bills have passed and, the budget rolls over. So it's.
But the last time they actually passed a comprehensive state budget, I do believe, was 3 years ago, if we are not mistaken.
I think that's right. And when you don't pass the budget, you really leave people hanging out to dry. Teachers, state employees, that type of thing. Those folks are just left out of it. And they can argue all they like that, we kept the government, it didn't shut down. Well, at a time when people are having problems affording things, as we've said over and over again, when you don't give them raises to keep up with inflation that's climbing at a very rapid rate, you're basically cutting their income. So that's the impact of not having a budget. Leaves people in the lurch, and it's irresponsible. It's the one thing we tell this government, the state legislature, they have to do, and they couldn't even do their jobs. That you can argue all you want, but Republicans don't govern very well. They never have. They don't like government, and so they just kind of don't do it. That's my take on it. So,
LaVon Barnes, who's a teacher out in Alamance County and one of our state legislative candidates this year who's running. So if you're in Alamance County, you should check him out. But he is somebody who would say that veteran teachers did not get anything out of this state budget like they needed to. And I think that that is definitely worth noting, at least from the perspective of folks who are working really, really hard right now with hard conditions already, with public schools failing like they are in the sense of rapidly classroom environments that are rapidly decrepit. I don't know how you would say that, but like mold in classrooms, especially in Alamance County over this last year that were reported. And LaVon is just somebody who's been a big advocate for public schools and the aspect of that. And I just think trying to make that case is really, really hard when you've also got Republicans that are like lauding a teacher pay increase when teacher pay was already measly as it is anyway. But
well, and trying to do more for young teachers, new teachers, early career stage teachers, as opposed to veteran teachers, is a philosophical thing that, Senator Berger, obviously head Republican in the Senate, at least for another few months, that comes from him, or that is something that he has espoused for years. And that is kind of why you see the raises that have been passed over the years staggered, for lack of a better word, like they are, is because the idea is that teacher quality, teacher impact kind of peaks at some point, as opposed to rewarding veteran teachers. I mean, you also have to free up money if you're going to have I can't remember how many hundreds of millions of dollars we put into opportunity scholarships right now per year, but I mean, it's hundreds of millions in vouchers for private schools. And I mean, that money has to come from somewhere. They can say it doesn't come from public schools, but all this money is fungible, as we say in budgetary speak. So if you take it from one place, you take it from another. My biggest takeaway on the budget is that it emerged. I'm going to process out here for just a second. No one who listens to me will be surprised by that. But it emerged as what's called a conference report, which means it's negotiated largely in secret by key members of the Senate, key members of the House. Even rank and file members may not see it. And then one morning, 1,200 pages becomes public, and they say, we're going to vote on this in the next 3-4 days, and then it'll be, it'll go to the governor. Also, because it's a conference report, it cannot be amended. So you cannot change a single word in it, which means within a couple of days, if you're a rank and file lawmaker, even a Republican, you have to absorb, 600 pages of text, another 600 pages of columns of numbers. And then you have to decide yes or no. And if you want teachers to get their raises, then you also have to vote for every other little thing in there that you probably don't understand the impact of. And there was just lots of stuff. We're still seeing stories come out a month later, almost a month later, that say, hey, by the way, this was in the budget. Hey, by the way, this was in the budget. And I promise you, the people who voted on this budget didn't fully understand it. They didn't know everything that was in it. One of the things they did know was, I'm just going to get lambasted if I vote against this budget after it being so late and it being so necessary and these raises being so important to so many people. And so that's a way that leadership can put things in that they want that you wouldn't accept otherwise. And that's not the ideal way to pass, a document that spends, if you include the federal money, something like $65 billion a year. And has a bunch of policy in it, too. I mean, a bunch of things that could or should be standalone bills that are debated and decided, is this a good idea? Is it not a good idea? Those conversations don't even happen because, again, it's just all piled together into one document.
Right. One thing somebody told me recently was that the Republican speaker's basically been absent. And I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not over there, but that most.
I mean, haven't they all been absent? They'll come back. I mean, literally, they come and do their. That's where I'm like, my God, y'all come back. And Destin Hall's sitting up there, like, looking at everybody, being like, yeah, we may come back like once or twice every month to do some things before. And then after the election, we'll come back again. I'm like, you're supposed to be a part-time legislature. These people make $14,000 a year to come to that building. And you're going to put everybody on a leash on their toes and be like, oh, we're going to jerk this time. Oh, we're going to jerk you back to Raleigh this time. And I'm like, respectfully, that is also why a lot of working people cannot choose to be in our legislature these days, because of the fact that they have leadership, to Travis's point, that likes to do things under the cover of nightfall, and also in backroom deals, like we are still in the heyday of mob bosses in some way.
Right, which gets back to what I was wondering about is I said, well, who's running the House then? And they said Destin Hall, or not Destin Hall, Brendan Jones. Said that Destin Hall is just basically absent and defaulting to Brendan Jones. Well, Brendan Jones is, like I called him, boss hog. He's a guy who's running,
taking bribes from people, taking campaign bribes from people, from people that he's
helping his buddies get sweetheart deals. It's like, this is not. We should be running a modern legislature. We shouldn't be having. If Destin Hall is going to be the speaker, he should step up and be the speaker. He shouldn't be deferring to his majority leader, who's not, from what I can tell, a very reputable guy. He's got, if you go look, he's like this small town little.
Now, hey, now small towns can produce some good ones.
They
Thomas
can,
Mills.
but historically,
don't go talking.
But that part
now, small-minded people, you could say all day. Small towns, now I'm gonna step in.
Well, I'm a small town guy too. But I've also, particularly in that part of the world, there have been people who are not exactly reputable. You're talking about the areas around Bladen County, Columbus County,
Now, don't you go talking shit about southeastern North Carolina like that, Thomas Mills. They can't help the fact that Brendan Jones has again gerrymandered himself into a seat that has allowed him to stick his ass out there. And y'all need to go look up Brittany, who is running against him right now in that district, if you're interested in defeating him this election cycle. But there's some good people in Bladen and Sampson counties and all over.
But Bladen and Columbus County, they have a long history of corruption. Go look and see what happened to
what part of rural North Carolina does it?
Well, those small towns, Anderson.
It's not just small towns. I'm just sitting here saying, when you have 5 families in one place that can own all of the property in it, and also the entirety of uptown, well, that's the same thing you see in urban North Carolina too, except for it's 5 developers who have decided that they are going to take over and monopolize everything instead of, having the screws put to them in some sense. I don't know what I'm doing with my hands
but
anymore,
Columbus County, but Columbus County's sheriff had to resign, right? Because of racist comments, and he and Brendan Jones were tight as ticks.
Is anybody surprised? Have y'all heard Brendan Jones speak before?
Saying, that's what's happened. From what I'm understanding, that guy's, he's House Majority Leader. That guy's got way too much power to have so much
under investigation, basically.
Ethics. And is he under investigation now?
I thought there was at least that dealing I thought was.
Yeah, right. It might be under investigation.
Shout out to every journalist in the state of North Carolina right now, though, that is genuinely covering the corruption, to Thomas's point, that's not happening in rural North Carolina, but that's happening in Raleigh, North Carolina right now on Jones Street, everybody, because there is quite a lot of it. And I think that what we're seeing is the uncovering, whether it be Republican lobbyists taking some of our legislators out to a bourbon distillery and getting them a little, hoot and hollering out there in Kentucky, or if it is Brendan Jones getting, to Thomas's point, sweetheart deals put in a state budget to try to pay off folks to get election money from them. I I think we got a lot of it, and it is one political party right now who is in charge and doing it. So I'm begging y'all to come out and vote for Democrats in November.
Right.
Shout out particularly to Dan Kane at the News and Observer,
exactly.
who has been writing for a few years now a series called Power and Secrecy that everyone should read. But some of the stories Anderson described, that's who reported them. It's Dan Kane. More folks get on that train because it's going to get real interesting real fast in Raleigh. We've seen some things move forward through the district attorney's office in Wake County, more so than in the past. There are a few lobbyists who were indicted. I rather doubt that those lobbyists are the ultimate target of that investigation because it seems to be widening more and more. We've got a new district attorney in Wake County who comes into office, I guess, in January, in Wiley Nickel, a former state lawmaker, a Democrat, former congressman, who had made it clear that cleaning up a culture of corruption in Raleigh would be part of his job. And that table is very much going to be set for him when he walks into office, and what he does with that and how lawmakers react. Would they be able to take the power, the oversight that the Wake County District Attorney has over those things away? I'm not sure. But I mean,
not if they don't have the power in the legislature to be able to get a bill passed without breaking a supermajority. I don't know.
That is something to very much keep an eye on. We could have kind of a sea change on this sort of thing going forward in Raleigh. And I don't know. I don't know what to expect just yet.
Well, it'd be pretty telling too, right? If Republicans in the state legislature were like, we're going to go strip the Wake County DA of the power to come after the politicians that are in Raleigh right now because we're so scared of what's going to come out of our own closets. I mean, that in and of itself too is my personal story about how all this happened, because they also did the same thing to our attorney general. Jeff Jackson not being able to sue the state legislature over any bill that he deems unconstitutional is the exact same thing as them not wanting to have, again, people hold them accountable to anything, because Raleigh is corrupt and Republicans in Raleigh are making it even more corrupt in that sense too. And that's the unfortunate reality of politics, but you can change that. There's a Democrat on everybody's ballot this year. Send a different person to the state legislature, everybody, please.
Anderson, I don't want you to miss the opportunity to tell everybody to vote Democratic this year, but
it's my first one back. Y'all gotta. I'm getting off my rust. You know what I mean?
I believe the corruption comes from the top down. I mean, what's going on in the White House is just staggering. I mean, they are plundering the country, and I think it filters right down. It's like all these Republicans in the state house are going, well, if he can do it, we can do it too. And it's what happens when you don't have enough accountability. I want to switch. We're going to have to get out of here in just a minute, but I want to hit one more thing, because it came out today that they have moved two congressional races in North Carolina from lean Republican to toss-up. The one in Western North Carolina, where Jamie Yeager is challenging Chuck Edwards, is now considered a toss-up. Don Davis, who was gerrymandered in a mid-decade gerrymandering, where they specifically went out there and tried to turn his seat into a Republican one, just had his move towards to toss up. So we have two competitive congressional races out there that we really didn't have when we started this cycle. And I think it says it's a telling movement, because it tells us two things. One is both of these campaigns have done what they need to do to win these seats, and that's a key point. There are a lot of places where you could make things competitive if you did everything right, but they never quite get there. These people have gotten there. They've raised the money. They put together the organization. They've excited their constituencies. So they're doing that. The other thing is it's telling you that in Washington, they are not seeing this political environment getting better for Republicans. They're seeing it get worse. And, that's what makes a wave election, is when this environment gets so bad. And I think part of it is, I saw an average. I think Donald Trump's now in his approval ratings are now stuck in the upper mid 30s, 38, 37, 38%. When you have a president with levels like that, and you have a dissatisfaction with just the general prices and that type of thing, it's very hard for an incumbent party to win. And I think that's I think it's a big deal. I think that we could see some things happen. And Republicans probably ought to sit up and take notice once they lose and say, we got to do things differently.
Well, and Democrats need to take notice and not see it. Wave elections are rarely about, you know what, I just decided I really like Democrats and I want their policies. And boy, I hope they just overreach like hell. No, don't do that, y'all, because that is how we just kind of get these ping pong balls back. And everybody's like, oh, now it's vendetta time. And it just, don't take the lessons of Donald Trump and just apply them to your, as your new methodology. I certainly hope that won't happen, but it is a very human frailty to want to do it that way, as opposed to just kind of trying to do what's right and do what's best for the country and for the state.
And you know what? All of our Democrats that won in 2024 have done just that. Look at Attorney General Jeff Jackson taking on everybody that he possibly can for cheating out North Carolinians out of their own pocketbooks.
I think Jackson's done a really good job, and I think a lot of Republicans would say that as well. I think he's been. I don't want to use the word surprise because that's not fair to what his reputation was going into office. I don't think, but every time I see something from him, I think this was.
You're like, damn. He's good.
Yeah, well, and that was known, right? But the way he has changed how he communicates, the way he has picked issues, the way he has picked things to become involved with just really speaks to a thoughtfulness and even a statesmanship that is just never guaranteed. So
he made the transition from legislative to executive branch, and some people do not do a great job with that. And he has done a good job. Josh Stein's done a very good job too. And it's a competence thing. But not only is it competence, these guys are looking to get things done. They're not just throwing partisan punches. And that's what you want. And I think that's what most North Carolinians want. They want people who can get things done for them.
Yeah, and the way the governor...
And you got a bench of them in North Carolina is all I'm saying.
You got a bench of them in North Carolina.
The governor is one to look to for an example of keeping your eyes forward on the future as opposed to the slights of the past. And trying to accomplish things with Republicans, without Republicans, you just trying to accomplish things in a bipartisan basis and taking the L's you have to take. Signing a budget that needed to be signed, but also saying, hey, there's some things in this that I don't like. So the blueprint is certainly there.
Right. Well, we're going to have to sign off, folks. We've been at it for over 45 minutes now. So, Anderson, you got anything you want to say before we get out of here besides vote Democrat?
I was about to say, anybody who doesn't know anything about our judges this year can go to ncdp.org/judges, though, and find out everything you need to know about them, because we've got Court of Appeals judges as well. I only talked about our Supreme Court justice today, but there are 3 Court of Appeals seats that are up this year. Court of Appeals is a 15-person bench in North Carolina statewide that are elected by you, the people, and there are only 3 Democrats on that bench, and all 3 of them are up this year. So Judge Toby Hampson, Judge John Arrowood, and Judge Christine Walczak need you to come out and vote for them too. That's my pitch.
What do you got for us, Travis?
I work for a transportation safety organization. Folks, 90% of people wear their seatbelts. 40% of the people who die in North Carolina in a car accident were not wearing their seatbelts. Seatbelts work, and you should not drive with a phone in your hand. You know that. But if you're doing that right now, listen to this podcast. Don't do it. Put it down.
All right. Well, I appreciate all of you listening to us. Anderson, thank you so much for being with us. Travis, thanks again. And I hope to see you in a few weeks so we can let people know what's happening in North Carolina politics. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We're signing off. This is Thomas Mills for Politics NC.